Hell no, they're too expensive. I can't even afford myself. That was the moment I realized the dream of the big, happy family didn't just change, it died. We're witnessing the fastest decline in birth rates in human history, and it's not just because of a bad economy. From the tutorial phase of our 20s to a world that feels like it's constantly on the brink, the question isn't when we're having kids anymore. It's why anyone would ever want to. And the answer might be more terrifying than the $300,000 price tag itself. Think about it. This isn't just some trend. It's a fundamental break in the human story. If our generation collectively decides to opt out, the very structure of society, everything from the economy to how we grow old, begins to collapse. We're standing at a crossroads where the standard path has become a dead end, and the consequences of us saying no are about to hit harder than anyone realizes. For the longest time, the narrative was on autopilot. You graduate, you get a 9 to 5, you find someone who doesn't annoy you too much, and then you start popping out kids because that's just what humans do. It was viewed as the ultimate win condition. The reason you work those long hours and the legacy that supposedly gives your life meaning. Even if money was tight, the older generations would tell you to just figure it out because the joy of parenting was supposed to outweigh any struggle. It's a beautiful, simple picture that worked for decades. But when you actually peel back that wallpaper and look at what's underneath, you realize that the standard path isn't just paved with good intentions. It's built on a foundation that's rapidly crumbling right under our feet. Because here's the quiet part out loud. The standard path wasn't just built on optimism. It was built on the blind assumption that the world would stay cheap and the future would stay bright. But now, we've pulled back the curtain to find that having a kid isn't just a milestone. It's a massive financial gamble in a casino where the house always wins. We've stopped looking at parenthood as a natural evolution and started seeing it for what it's actually become. A luxury subscription service that most of us can't even find the sign up button for, let alone the monthly fee. The truth is, we aren't failing the system. We're just the first generation to perform a cold-blooded audit on a lifestyle that's been over-leveraged for decades. And the math is finally starting to scream. But here's the kicker, the part they don't want to admit while they're judging us from their paid-off suburban houses. It's not just that the math doesn't add up, it's that the why doesn't add up anymore either. We've stumbled onto the industry's biggest secret. Parenting was never actually the end goal. It was just the default setting because nobody knew where the options menu was. See, the older generation didn't have kids just because they were more ready or noble than us. They had them because they lived in an echo chamber where starting a family was the only social currency that proved you were a functioning human. But we've got the receipts now. We can see the burnout, the quiet resentment, and the way they struggled in silence just to maintain a normal image. The hidden truth? We aren't just avoiding the bill, we're rejecting the lie that you have to set your own life on fire just to keep a tradition alive. We're finally realizing that biological purpose was often just a mask for social pressure. And now that the mask is off, the game looks a lot different. We aren't just being selfish with our time. We're being honest about a reality they were too afraid to question. And once you see that the perfect family narrative was actually a high-stakes survival trap, there is absolutely no going back. Think about that just figure it out advice your parents love to give. It's the fatal flaw in their entire worldview. The blind assumption that if you just jump, a net will magically appear. Back then, the deep end was a backyard pool. Today, it's the middle of the ocean during a hurricane. They see a child as a natural milestone, like a rite of passage you just walk through. We see a child as a high-stakes startup that requires $1 million in seed funding just to hit break-even by age 25. The old way worked because they could afford to be blind. We don't have that luxury. We're trading a scripted blessing for an unscripted freedom. Finally winning a game they didn't even realize was rigged from the start. And here's the unfair advantage we have that they never did. radical visibility. We aren't flying blind on instinct anymore. We're operating with the full data set. While previous generations were sold the dream of a legacy through bloodlines, we've realized that in the digital age, your legacy isn't tied to a mini-me. It's tied to your own autonomy. We've discovered the ultimate cheat code. You don't have to sacrifice your prime years to build a family when you can use those same years to build yourself. This isn't just opting out. It's a strategic pivot. We're the first generation to look at the biological clock and realize it's just a countdown to a financial and mental prison that we finally have the password to bypass. The real secret? We've stopped being afraid of missing out on the miracle of life and started being terrified of missing out on our own. Once you taste that level of unchecked personal freedom, the social pressure to reproduce doesn't feel like a duty anymore. It feels like a heist. But here's the terrifying pivot no one wants to talk about while they're celebrating their child-free weekends. We're treating this independence like a permanent win, but we're ignoring the fact that the house always finds a way to collect. We've successfully dodged the bullet of biological duty, but we might have just walked into a sniper's nest of total systemic isolation. See, the world isn't built for solo players. It's designed to extract every cent from anyone who doesn't have a unit to lean on. We're betting that our bank accounts can replace a bloodline, and that a chosen family won't disappear when the economy hits a total dead end. We've rejected the trap of the past, only to find ourselves standing on a ledge with no safety net and the wind starting to pick up. Because what happens when you finally win the game of self-reliance, only to realize you're the only one left on the server? The real nightmare isn't the kids we didn't have. It's the moment we realize we've been played by a different system entirely. Because maybe the real realization isn't that we're too broke to afford a family, but that we're too self-aware to offer a soul to a world that views children as nothing more than future taxpayers and data points. We've reached the final stage of the tutorial, and instead of clicking New Game, we're finally looking at the exit button. The older generations see this as a tragedy, a collapse of the human spirit, but they're missing the point. This isn't a funeral for the family. It's a strike against a machine that stopped making sense. We aren't just choosing ourselves out of vanity. We're holding the line until the world becomes something worth inheriting again. If the house always wins, then the only way to beat the game is to stop handing over the chips. Our legacy won't be the bloodlines we continued, but the cycle of unconscious survival that we finally had the courage to break. We aren't the generation that failed the future. We're the one that cared enough to stop feeding it a lit. So when the world tries to frame our choice as a tragedy or a failure of spirit, realize that they're just reading from a script that's been out of print for decades. We're not the generation that gave up on the dream. We're the one that woke up and realized the dream was being sold to us by the very people who broke the reality. This isn't a refusal to love. It's a refusal to gamble with a life that isn't ours to risk. We're holding out for a version of the future that's actually worth inheriting. And until then, we're choosing to be the masters of our own time, rather than the servants of a system that only sees us as a demographic. If you've reached that same point where the standard path just looks like a dead end, let me know where you stand in the comments. Are we really the ones missing out, or have we finally found the exit? Let's talk about it.